Well, there are dark periods of our history many people would rather forget.
The Holocaust is one of those, and the horrors endured by the Jews and anyone targeted by the Nazis. There were 20 main concentration camps.
When you factor in sub-camps and forced labor camps, there was a system of hundreds that stretched across Europe by the time World War II ended in 1945. Buchenwald, a camp located in Germany, was liberated that year. This is National Archive film of that. In the 8 years it was in operation, it's estimated more than 56,000 people died there. On April 11th, 1945, starved and emaciated prisoners stormed the watchtowers, and that afternoon, U.S. forces entered the camp. The horrors they found there were documented. Military photographer D.P. McGee of Mayfield helped do that. The images he captured haunted him, but his service ensured the world would never forget their sacrifice.
This is writings from my dad.
The words of his father.
When we got out of our truck and strolled down a long wooded lane, as we would turn the bend in the road where comes into a view our first close-up of the site of Buchenwald concentration camp. It is truly the front entrance to hell itself.
The images he saw more than 70 years ago.
The same vacant, lifeless stares, the same wasted people with warped minds. No mercy, he says. Don't they know the meaning of the word?
This isn't easy for Steve McGee.
Well, it just brings it all back, and I haven't read this little story he's wrote in years.
His dad, D.P., was a photographer, a love he carried with him through life.
When he came home from the war, he had his own photography lab in the basement where he developed black and white. He did amateur weddings, photography for fun, and yeah, he was the guy that always took the pictures at the family gatherings, and he wasn't in a lot of those pictures.
It was a skill he trained for in the Army Air Corps, a member of the photo tech unit.
This is a picture of him at his camera repair school. So in order to be a photographer, you had to be able to strip down the camera and repair it in the field, just like your rifle. So the camera was very important to him. If it came to a choice of saving your rifle or the camera, they told him to save the camera. We'll protect you. So
on April 11th, 1945, his lens would become a window for the world to see the horrors of Buchenwald. Steve and his wife Donna have the pictures he took there. The celebration of being liberated, a crowd preparing to go home.
Here's a little dummy of Hitler they hung.
Evidence of mass deaths.
Those are all bones and ashes. This is how they found the camp when they got there.
People were treated like cattle.
As you can see, they all have these handmade stretchers.
Assigned numbers.
They would inject them with ink. They said it was very, very painful. It wasn't like a tattoo nowadays.
Starved, emaciated, hanging on to life by a thread.
They had them fed and hydrated them fluid fast as they could, but they had to be careful giving it to them too fast, you know, because they were just starving.
Small details give perhaps the greatest understanding of their suffering.
This picture kind of gets to me. You probably can't see it, doesn't do it justice. This is when they walked in. Here's the prisoners in the barracks. And right here and right down here and here are actually dead bodies laying there. And the stench was pretty bad there. This is the conditions they were living in.
There are smiles on these prisoners' faces. They're grateful to see the Americans.
It's just overwhelming. To me, this picture is even more devastating than the dead bodies, because these guys are going to make it, hopefully, and they can't believe they finally got rescued.
So I just know him through pictures.
Donna is a retired teacher.
I have to say that middle schoolers are usually loud, but when we would take the pictures in, it would just be dead silence.
She and Steve used these images to teach a difficult lesson.
It's just different to hold the actual picture of it and to realize that it's the truth and it happened, and that there was a group of people so evil in the world that would do something like that. Even with the pictures, it's hard to understand that kind of evil.
DP didn't talk to Steve about what he saw at Buchenwald until he was older.
This says, "To the one and only girl in the whole world with lots of love, D.P. McGee Jr., 1943. She got that in the mail, I'm assuming, sometime while he was over there.
Steve's mother heard many of the stories when DP came home. She knew how hard it was for him to live with those memories and the strength it took to shoot these pictures.
Because this is all his typing here explaining what picture is. There lies half a man. We are not prepared for what we see. You can say so much in a picture, you might not be able to fathom in your mind, but my dad describing this is kind of like an artist describing his work.
Years after his death, and even more after what happened under the Nazis' rule, Steve is proud of his father's contribution.
It's humbling and sickening, but very, very rewarding to see this.
His service was bearing witness, so their sacrifice is not forgotten. Well, the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum reports that while the Holocaust is the best documented case of genocide, calculating the exact numbers killed by the Nazis is an impossible task. There are many reasons for this, including that toward the end of the war, the Nazis were destroying documentation.
And we know that happened at Buchenwald. To attempt to get an accurate number, scholars, governmental agencies, and Jewish organizations since the 1940s have looked at census reports, German and Axis archives, and post-war investigations. So here's a look at some of the current estimates. Of course, 6 million Jews, around 7 million Soviet civilians, 1.3 million of which were Jews and are included in the 6 million number. And around 3 million Soviet prisoners of war and around 1.8 million non-Jewish Polish civilians. Dr. Lori Ballou is president of Temple Israel, a Jewish synagogue in Paducah. She helped us articulate how silence and complacency can lead to the death of millions. Well, she read this post-war confession by German Lutheran pastor Martin Niemöller. It speaks to the danger we all face when we don't speak up in the face of wrongdoing.
First, they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for the communists, and I did not speak out because I was not a communist. Then they came for the trade unionist, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak out for me.